Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I'm excited for my conversation today with Lisa Lynn. She is many things. This girl is talented. She is a designer by day and an energy healer by night. Back in 2017, she shifted her corporate career focus to personal wellness after a series of health and emotional events. She began a rediscovery of herself and who she wanted to be for the second half of her life, like many of us have done. She now operates Magic Healer, and that's magic with a CK or a K on the end, an energy healing studio focused on servicing the world with universal energy and crystal healing, bringing the magic of metaphysics to everyone around her, one person at a time. Welcome to the show today, Lisa.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I want to go back because I know I want to talk about your day job a little bit too, because it's super cool. I love what you do. But let's go back. I know you're originally from Taiwan and you moved here when you were 15. What was that experience like?
Wow. So it kind of sets the tone for the rest of my life when I first decided that I wanted to study abroad. And it was my own decision. And luckily, it was very much supported by my parents. So that experience was just eye-opening because I came from a background or a learning environment where everything was kind of fed to me and we have to do things the same way and we have to conform to a environment that was, you can set your future. You can study anything you want. You can be anything you want. So for me, that was very much empowering and then kind of started my self-discovery that I am no longer just have to be good at math. I no longer have to just be good at physics, and I have other options in this world.
That's amazing. What a huge decision to make at 15 to come to the US. I can only imagine that could be a day-long conversation in and of itself, I'm sure. So you finished high school here and started college here?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And you decided to stay, or did you ever go back?
Yeah. So when I first came here, I actually landed in Hawaii. And that was in itself a very amazing experience. And I stayed with my cousin and my aunt and learning how to be self-sufficient, because before that I was the only child in the house where everything's kind of tailored around me. And so that was the start, kind of like how people had their college at 18, but I kind of started a little bit earlier at 15. And so I went to high school in Hawaii, one of the biggest public school there. So we have 2,000 students just per class, like per graduating class. So it was already kind of like a college scale. So I decided I would go to college in Indiana. So I went to IU. And if you ask me, why did I move all the way there? It was because they have really beautiful campus. That's the one thing that drew me there.
But that's a far jump from, and culturally, right? To go from Taiwan to Hawaii is a little more aligned, but all the way to Indiana, that must have been a bit of culture shock.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. So talk a little bit about, so you studied business, computer.
Yes. Yeah. But that really actually opened my eyes up to what the middle America, the real America is like.
I bet. My goodness. Yeah, whole different world. So you studied business, you were in the business school rather, and you got a degree in computer information systems. That was, I don't want to say early on, but I graduated from college just shortly before you. And I remember in some of the computer science programs, it was still heavily male dominated. Was that your experience as well?
So I was probably the only few female graduating from that specific study that year. Yep.
Yeah. I bet that's, and it's great to see more and more girls majoring in computer information systems, computer science. But you were definitely a pioneer at the time. So let's talk about some of the early decisions you made in your career. You went into web design and graphic design right out of school. Is that right?
Yes, I did. That was kind of another journey on its own, because as I was going through the computer information system program, I realized I really enjoy graphic design, and I didn't know what that was called back then, because the design part and then the art part was the business school. But when I was interning and when I was in college, I had a taste of what Photoshop was like. And then I was like, wow, this is a whole new world. And this is something where I can compose anything I want. I don't necessarily have to be really good at drawing or painting, but having a really good intuition on design could get me really far into this. So after I graduated, I decided to tell my parents, I really, really want to go into design. And obviously my parents were really against it. They were kind of traditional and they didn't know what that is about. They don't know what graphic design is. So I kind of just ventured my own path into that.
That's awesome. That's great. And you really, you have done so much throughout your career. You worked for some big companies. You worked for Sony. I love that you also worked here locally in San Diego for the San Diego Symphony, in UI, UX development, graphic design, web design. You really have, you worked for Geary Interactive, you worked for Intuit, which is the maker of QuickBooks. Right. You have had an amazing career path. Talk about just some of the steps along the way, Lisa, and some of the decisions you made, to take a particular job or to move, to different companies throughout your career path.
Yep. So when I first started the web design, I was probably the only few female web designer out there. And it was just the Wild West back then. You could be anything, you can do anything. And I just remember right after that job, I decided to move to Hong Kong. And that's where I had a taste of like the internet, the boom. And the company that was in Hong Kong did everything from incubation of new ideas all the way to like movie production. So I had a wider range of different type of projects. And, that was really fun for me at that moment. But after that, I started to feel a little bit, how can I put it this way, limited on the knowledge that I had for my design career, because I was really never fully trained on design. Like so far I've taken, to that degree with the books I'm reading, things I read. And just to let you know that back then we didn't have YouTube. We had, we probably had a few design books that was circulating around. So I decided I'll go back to school. So I went back to San Diego City College to get an associate degree in graphic design. And that was itself a very humbling experience, knowing that I was at a really well paid position at Sony Electronics. And then all of a sudden go back to a graphic design industry where it pays half of that. And some of my decision was very, mind-boggling to my parents, because that time it doesn't seem like a good financial decision, but to me, I saw it as more of an investment. So that's kind of setting me off on the right path to become a graphic designer and a designer till the end.
Absolutely. I mean, I could see where that would be so helpful to be able to have both sides. And just to define, if folks are listening to this and they're like, I don't know what a UX, UI designer is, UX designer is user experience, right? And UI stands for user interface design.
Yes.
And so it's not, I don't think a lot of people think about this when they think about web development or app development or just any kind of digital development. It's not only the colors and the fonts and the imagery that you're using. It is truly, how does somebody interact and navigate through an experience, whether that's a website or an app? And that is incredibly challenging. I mean, that is just like, kudos to you, Lisa. Like, I mean, I have a little experience with this because I've got a marketing background. Yeah. I was director of marketing for a tech company prior to launching my first business. And, the experience that a user has when they go to a website, like, where do they go? Where do they click? How do they find things? What is the thought process? How do you make it easy, efficient, usable? All the things is like, I think it's one of the most amazing sciences that's overlooked, frankly.
I'm so glad you said that, because it is a science and an art combining together. And that's why I was so deeply in love with it when I discovered it. And most people know, if you were going to school in the 90s or 2000, there's no degree such as like a UI designer. You kind of just have to stumble your way through and learn as you go. And the fun part of it, it's almost like, before it was more like a Wild West, and now it's more like you're going into the cave and digging for treasure. And so for me, the user's mindset, which later on kind of connect with what I'm doing now, is deeply embedded in psychology. And a lot of our actions are in our subconscious. Like 90% of what we do today, our reactions are based on subconscious behavior. And so for me, being a experienced designer, we really have to find different ways to dig out what is it that they're facing, what is it the challenge, what is it the purpose, what is the obstacle, and try to construct a new reality for them through our lenses, and hopefully along the way helping them, shorten what they have to do or make it easier, more delightful, and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it stems into so many levels. It's like everything we interact with now, whether it's, a piece of software or a website or an app, it's all about that experience. So you spent quite a bit of time at Intuit working on the TurboTax product. Talk a little, yeah, and then talk a bit, and QuickBooks as well. You were a senior visual designer there as well. And you were there up until July 2020, which, reflecting back.
It's very recent. Yes, right.
A lifetime ago in some ways, but yes, very recent. And you left and now are running your own design business full time and doing this amazing healing work as well. So talk, Lisa, about a bit first about some of your experiences at Intuit, and what was the decision to say, you know what, I've been here. I mean, you were there 7-ish, 8 years.
8 years.
8 years. Yeah. So, what was that decision like to just just jump off the cliff and and do your own thing.
Yeah, right. It was literally like that, jumping off the cliff. So TurboTax was such a fun ride, and it seems like a lifetime ago. So I don't know if people remember filing taxes about 10 years ago or even 8 years ago. It was a very grueling experience. It's just very, tedious. You got to get all your numbers together. And TurboTax decided that they would take a design approach. When I first joined, their goal, you would probably laugh about this, their goal for TurboTax in 10 years is do no taxes. That's their goal. That's their goal. They hope to automate so much of it that you literally just have to click a few buttons, and they're getting there. Click a few buttons and we can gather all your information and just do it for you. Actually, in other parts of the country, the world, like for example, Taiwan, you really don't need to do your taxes. Just everything that you have purchased and everything that's already automatically generated. And so when I heard that vision, I was like, wow, I need to get on with this because I do not like filing taxes. I wanted to see how this journey is going to take me and make this such a tedious work so much easier. And that's what they did. And they really try to get into the lens of the user. We have many offsite, like making hypotheses. What if this user want to do this? What if you're a simple user and stuff like that, to really shorten their path of finishing this whole transaction, right? Because it's a very long journey. You're talking about 30 plus, sometimes 50 pages of form. And how do we make that just like a conversation to the customer? And so if you look at TurboTax today, which were some of the work, and with some very talented designer that we did, it's like a conversation. They're asking you questions. How many people are in your family? What did you do this year? And then they construct that reality for you. And I thought that was really brilliant.
Yeah, that is that is definitely an amazing role. But as we know here in the U.S., we tend to be a little bit in the wild west mode of like, I don't want somebody doing this for me. I want to do it myself. So,
right.
So
right.
When
and going back to what you,
go ahead.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Please. No, please go for
it. So going back to what we were saying about jumping off the cliff. So at the very end of my my time there, things are just starting to move a little bit slower for me because, as you guys know, Intuit is such a large corporation, and I was suffering a lot of different health issue. I started to have joint pain, and then discovered that I have celiac. And then later, when I tried to start a family, I had a numerous different complication. So with pregnancy, so after a few incidents, and then alongside with the passing of my father, it was just too much for my emotional, body to kind of bear with all the pain. So that was a really difficult decision for me to leave, but I'm really glad that it took me out of that kind of a box or restraint that your life is just a designer. You don't have anything else outside of it. I kind of had an open box. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I started learning about hobbies. You will be surprised. I never had a hobby. So it's like me working along all the time. So that was, very much like me rediscovering what Lisa really needed at that moment, the spiritual awakening. So that was my decision that I wanted to leave and kind of pursuing this new discovery of who I am, what am I going to do with the latter part of my life, and what's my contribution to this world. And if I die one day, what is going to be my contribution to the rest of the world? Is it just going to say Lisa was a good designer and the end? So it's kind of like the midlife crisis rediscovering. So yeah, so that was a painful awakening, but then going back to the root of everything.
Yeah, that's a huge decision. And I'm so glad that you had that decision and an epiphany to leap. And so glad you landed here with us at Hera Hub. And I've had the pleasure of meeting your beautiful son. And so wonderful to see that you were able to start a family and launch your business. Talk a little bit about what you're doing now on the design side, some of the projects you're working on, and then let's get into your moonlighting as the magic healer.
I feel so fortunate to run into you and Hera Hub, and it was actually just an accident that day. I decided, I have so many interviews, and with my little toddler screaming downstairs, I really can't concentrate. So I just start Googling to you and see that there was an office space that's available. So that gave me a piece of heaven for me to be able to focus into my work. And then this is just like my private Lisa land. So yeah. So right now what I'm doing is I recently joined a company that is focused on enterprise software that helps with C-level executive performance management. But that's just a lot of jargon, but basically just saying that it's a way to kind of consolidate a lot of the financial information along with human resources or financial resources in a really easy digestible way for the executives to make an easy decision for the future project or a large expenses or for next year's financial planning. And most of our clients are really big hospitals. So healthcare is a great big section of our software. And they ranges from, we're about to build this new wing for the hospital, but do we have enough resources, and do we have enough guiding stakeholders? And those are kind of the experience that they usually have to go through a very tedious process to go through, but we are able to bring that onto the digital format and kind of help guide them through that decision-making process. Yep.
So important. That is, I mean, the decision-making for any company, especially that size, that's critical information. That's great. Are you working solely with that particular company, or are you also doing some other projects?
No, I am just doing that right now as my full-time position. And on my side, when I try to kind of balance out with my metaphysics business, which is Magic Healer.
Wonderful. And so let's get into that. How do it sounds like in this journey of self-discovery and making a decision to leave into it, was that the period of time that you came to this, or has this been something that you've been doing all along, Lisa?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I wanted to say the period after I left the corporate world, I was feeling a void that was really empty. I was brought up atheist, and so I didn't really have any religious belief. But yet, intuitively, I have certain experience in the past where I cannot explain out of any explanation, any scientific explanation. And as you guys know that I mentioned this earlier, I was in computer information systems. So I would like to think I think very rationally, and I only believe things that have evidence. And so when I was going through that void, there are messages and things are just starting coming to me. That kind of opens my eye to see things that I cannot see, or understanding things that are not literal. And so that is the period of time when I start getting into learning the path from the modern mystery school. And the modern mystery school is a direct lineage from King Solomon, which was inherited in the last 3,000 years. And some of the really famous people who learned and study under that, and, like Da Vinci, like a lot of our presidents, and even, very high level spiritual leaders like Dalai Lama. So, but these are not things that they open to the public. And so when I kind of start entering into that realm, I asked a lot of questions. I asked a lot of questions to myself and then to my instructor, because to me, so far in my life, I haven't found the spiritual belief or philosophy that can explain all of these separate pieces that surrounds my life, the spiritual, emotional body, and the mind. And so I was looking for an answer for that. And fortunately, Kabbalah was able to help me kind of structure the reality and kind of understand and open up my eyes to a lot of different things.
That is amazing. Wow. Yeah. I love that you opened it up with that perspective and just giving background, on how you came to this and your approach and how you think through things. So what type of work are you doing with others around the Magic Healer brand?
Mm-hmm. Right. So there are two folds of the Magic Healer. And I always want to think of myself kind of like a designer. I'm bridging between science and art. And now I really want to bridge between science and spirituality, or energy healing. And whenever I go into a new modality, I really wanted to research my way all the way in to make sure that, there are ways that we could comprehend in this reality, in this dimension. So the magic side, the ritual side, I'm doing a lot of life activation ceremony. And what that is that we have spiritual light that when we were born, they were channeling directly onto us. But as we grow, as we enter, different parts of our life, different kind of trauma and different kind of incidents will put a shield around us. So this is a human way of protecting ourselves. But as we go through these traumas, the shell becomes thicker and thicker, and the light no longer comes through directly. So what life activation is, it really brings that alignment back so that you can truly understand your life purpose. And a lot of people, when they're getting into, this whole human, path, as we call it, human race, sometimes we're pursuing things that we don't even know why we're pursuing it. You're doing things that, is based on someone else's or your family member or what other are expected of you. And a lot of the time we forget to ask ourselves, because we ourselves already have all the answers, and we could consult with our higher self, but that message or that path, that passage is blocked from all the trauma and all the hurt and all the tears that it's happened around. It really is reset your mind, reset your light, so that you can start opening up your channel to receive the most positive advice.
I love that. This is all new for me, so it's really interesting to hear you talk about it, Lisa. What are some of the things that you're working on with either of the your day job or your moonlight job, um, or work, I should say? Some of the things maybe that you're excited about here for the rest of 2021.
So I recently just got certified to be an NLP master. NLP is a neuro linguistic programming, a psychological method of restructuring the way that you think. This was the and then by a linguistic professor, and I am really hoping that for the rest of this year and moving on to be incorporating a lot of those NLP technique into my magic healing process. Because if you look at them fundamentally, they're very similar. They're all about looking into the root of the problem, talking to the unconscious level of all of ourselves, and really kind of dig through what was your blocker, what was your trauma, what was inside of yourself to find that connection. So I'm just so excited to be at this era, because I just know that we're right at the pinnacle point where science and spirituality or energies are coming together, going to explain all of these metaphysics world that we wasn't able to explain before. But there's so many scientists that are now dive into studying about another dimension. We all heard of quantum physics, and now we have a way to measure energy. So this is just such an exciting time for all of us to say, like, hey, we don't just live in one kind of world. We don't just live in a world that we only believe what we can see. But there's another side of things that we could use to help heal ourselves, or to help us find our path, to live a happier life, to say goodbye to the trauma that we have experienced before, and look at the world differently through a new lens.
I love it. Awesome. Well, if our listeners want to learn more, where's the best place for them to connect with you, Lisa?
Yeah, so you can go to magichealer.com, and the spelling is magic with a CK in healer. And also you can find me mostly on Instagram under magic.healer. And that is where I will be communicating a lot of the new ideas, and then the new thoughts, and the new message that I get through from the top.
Awesome. Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much for your time, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.